Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So good evening. My name is Jessica Robinson, and I'm the Education Program Manager for the Savannah Institute. And just for those who are new to the Nutshell series and to the Savannah Institute is a nonprofit organization that works in collaboration with farmers and scientists to develop perennial food and fodder crops with diverse, multifunctional systems grounded in ecology and inspired by the Savannah biome. I'm really excited to introduce Tom Wahl. Tom Wahl has worked with the Savannah Institute for a while, and in this nutshell, he's going to discuss the design, site selection, interplanting, growing, harvesting, and marketing of pawpaws in Midwestern agroforestry and perennial polyculture systems. So a little bit about Tom. He was born and raised in Iowa and graduated from Iowa State University in 1984 with a degree in Fisheries and Wildlife Biology. Tom, together with his wife Kathy Dice and their 2 children, grow around 80 different perennial crops in an integrated agroforestry/perennial polyculture system, which is crazy cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get his PowerPoint going, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes, and I'll turn it over to him.
We're going to be talking about pawpaws, and I'm going to start by telling you what a pawpaw is, because most Americans have no idea what pawpaws are, even if they were born and raised in areas where pawpaw is a dominant understory tree in the area. The pawpaw, Asimina triloba, in the family Ananaceae, the custard apple family, is the largest fruit native to North America. It can get up to about the size of a large grapefruit, or about 1.5 pounds maximum. Wild pawpaws usually aren't that big. What a pawpaw is not is the tree that British and Australians call a pawpaw, which is what we call a papaya. They're not related, completely different trees. There are about 7 or 8 other species of pawpaw in North America. All of those are restricted to South Georgia and Florida, and all produce small, poor quality fruit. It's only the common pawpaw, Asimina triloba, that produces a high quality edible fruit. Pawpaw flavor is usually described by people as a mix of banana and mango with a creamy pudding-like texture, or custard-like texture, hence the name Custard Apple. A few of the other species in the, or a few fruit that are related to pawpaw in the same family include cherimoya, sweet sop, soursop, guanabana, sugar apple, custard apple. Midwesterners have almost never heard of these, but they're very common, well-known tropical fruits worldwide. As I said, most people describe the flavor as a cross between banana and mango, but some people report other flavors, including coconut, pineapple, citrus, a melon, and you might notice most of those other fruits that people taste are also tropical fruits, because this is a tropical fruit that grows in a cold climate. Next slide. Here you see, I would say, an average-sized pawpaw for a commercial pawpaw orchard. They can get to be about twice that size. Okay. Next slide again. And let's go one more. Okay, the pawpaw is a natural understory tree. It'll grow in fairly dense shade and fruit there, although they will fruit the most in full sun. I would estimate they produce 50 to 75% of a crop. % of a crop in full shade. When the trees are very young and small, under 2 feet tall, they actually need protection from direct sun. Direct sun can stunt their growth or even kill them when they're under 2 feet tall. Once they reach 2 feet tall, they can take full sun. And they will produce the largest crop in full sun, although I have some anecdotal evidence to suggest the lifespan of the tree may be somewhat reduced in full sun compared to growing in partial shade. Next slide. The best kind of places to grow pawpaws are sites with deep, fertile, moist, but well-drained soil. They prefer a soil pH below 6.5, although they will tolerate a higher soil pH than that. They will tolerate somewhat poorly drained soils, but probably not soils that are constantly waterlogged. They will tolerate prolonged periods of flooding once they're established, as long as the top of the tree is sticking out of the water. I have seen pawpaws sitting in a flooded area for 5 months straight with just their tops out of the water. When the flood waters receded, the pawpaws were the only thing in the forest left alive. But it is difficult to establish pawpaws on poorly drained soil. Next slide. Pawpaws can be planted in full sun with a 2-foot-tall tree shelter to protect them from full sun and wind. Suggested spacing between pawpaws could be anywhere from 10 by 10 feet up to 10 by 20 feet. That would be 10 feet within rows and 10 feet between rows, up to 10 feet within rows and 20 feet between rows. Pawpaws do need cross-pollination. Next slide. Pawpaws need cross-pollination to set fruit. And pawpaws are not pollinated by bees, but they are pollinated by beetles and flies, especially carrion flies. And these kinds of insects don't do a lot of traveling, and that's why pawpaws need to be spaced fairly close to each other in order to achieve adequate cross-pollination. Pawpaws take about 4 to 6 years from seed to achieve bearing, fruit bearing, or for grafted trees, maybe 3 to 5 years. Next slide. This map shows the native range of pawpaws in the eastern United States, and especially in Iowa. The commercial range for pawpaws is actually goes quite a ways farther north, probably not much west, but it can go quite a bit north. So if you draw a line from the coastal area of New Hampshire, southwestern through about the middle of southern Michigan, central Wisconsin, to southern Minnesota, the southwest corner of South Dakota, and then down along eastern Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Anything south or east of that line would be within the pawpaw's potential commercial range. Yes, pawpaws can grow in both Minnesota and Wisconsin. Pawpaw cultivars, or varieties, can be divided into 3 groups. The oldest group are selections from the wild, which include the varieties like Overlease, Taylor, Taytu, Davis, Sunflower, Mitchell, Prolific, Mango, Pennsylvania Golden number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and some newer ones that include some found in Iowa called Halvin's Sidewinder and the Prince Caspian. Advanced selections are a result of breeding, usually breeding two named varieties with each other, and then growing the offspring up and selecting the best from that group. And a few of these include NC1, SAA overlease, and SAB overlease. All three of these are seedlings of overlease. Maria's Joy and Summer Delight. Some advanced selections have been patented. These include the Peterson pawpaws, Shenandoah, Susquehanna, and Rappahannock. Other advanced selections are trademarked, including some other Peterson pawpaws, Wabash, Potomac, Allegheny, and a brand new release, Tallahatchie. Also, other trademarked pawpaws include KSU Atwood and Benson from Kentucky State University's Pawpaw breeding program. Thanks. Now that I've mentioned all those varieties, you might wonder, which ones should I plant? And now I'm going to utter blasphemy. I recommend, instead of these grafted varieties, I suggest planting seedlings of these varieties. And this is heresy, especially to people in the academic community, but I'm going to explain why. Next slide. And then one more. The above ground portion of a pawpaw tree has a limited lifespan, a short lifespan for a tree. I would say in Iowa, on average, the above ground or the top of a pawpaw tree lasts about 15 years, plus or minus 5 years. That's a pretty short lifespan for a tree, and that's comparable to, or maybe even shorter than, a dwarf apple tree. If you plant a grafted variety, such as sunflower or Mitchell or Prolific or overlease, you'll have that tree, it'll take that tree maybe 5 years to come into fruit production. And you'll have, if you're lucky, maybe 10 years of production from that tree. And then it's going to go into decline. The root system will start sending up sprouts from the roots called suckers, and the tree will decline and die, usually somewhere around 15 years of age. So if you're lucky, you get 10 years worth of fruit production out of that tree, and then it's gone. If instead you plant seedlings of grafted varieties, especially if both the parents were superior seedlings, that original trunk is still going to die in 15 years. But when it sends up suckers from the root system, those suckers are going to be genetically identical to the original tree and produce the same quality fruit. All you have to do when the tree starts to go into decline, select a sucker to replace it, let it grow, or you could even select several suckers, maybe even a dozen or more suckers, and have a whole bunch of trees. If you try and do that with a grafted tree, chances are the grafted tree is grafted onto just a wild seedling, which will produce a small quantity of small seedy fruit, potentially with poor quality. With superior seedlings, you can have a tree that may last centuries. On my farm, I have several such seedlings that came from a cross between two superior grafted varieties. Regulus, Rigel, Atria, and Betria are four of them that I have named and am propagating right now. I have probably at least 10 others that are worthy of propagating and naming and releasing as a new variety. And in fact, all of these trees, even the ones that haven't been named yet, are probably better than the older selections from the wild, like Prolific and Pennsylvania Golden, Mango, Mitchell, T2, Davis. Okay, next slide. Pests and diseases. By far and away, the worst pests of pawpaws are four-legged, raccoons and possums. Especially possums will climb the trees and start testing the fruit months before they're ripe. And when a possum tests the fruit, they bite into it slightly, leaving tooth marks. And that renders the fruit unmarketable. Raccoons don't usually test the fruit, but as soon as they smell the fruit's ripe, they will start climbing the trees, breaking off branches. They'll take one bite out of a pawpaw and then go to the next one. They can do a considerable amount of damage, at least if you have just a few trees, a dozen or fewer trees. The possums and raccoons can ruin or eat a considerable percentage of the harvest. But if you've got hundreds of trees, the damage is noticeable, but not enough to be serious, at least not to me. I'm willing to share some of my pawpaws with raccoons and possums, as long as they don't take too much. Another potential pest is the Paw Paw peduncle borer, which is a tiny moth whose caterpillar feeds on the peduncle, or the stem that connects the pawpaw fruit to the twig. I've never seen one or seen evidence of them. They exist, but I don't think they're a serious economic pest anywhere within the pawpaw's range. Another critter that depends solely on pawpaws is the caterpillar of the zebra swallowtail butterfly. I'm actually willing to share my pawpaws with as many zebra swallowtail butterflies as want to come by. I usually only see them once every few years, though. Japanese beetles will occasionally feed on pawpaw leaves a little bit. Usually, I'll find them dead under the tree afterwards. But once in a while, I'll find dozens of Japanese beetles feeding on pawpaw leaves. The reason pawpaws don't have very many insect pests is the leaves, twigs, and the skin of the fruit all contain some very powerful chemicals which are seriously insecticidal. There really aren't very many insects that can feed on any part of a pawpaw without dying. I have never had to spray any of my pawpaws with anything for pest control. Next slide. I should probably mention, too, that pawpaws are not wind tolerant. They have very large leaves. They can be up to 18 inches long and 6 inches wide, so they act like giant flags. On a windy site, the leaves just get shredded. They really need to be planted either to the lee side of a hill or the lee side of forest or windbreak or building or something to protect them from the dominant winds. Pawpaws take very little pruning. I prune up my pawpaws only just enough to keep the tree short enough so that I don't have fruit up out of reach of pickers. I would say I spend somewhere between 10 to 30 seconds pruning a single pawpaw tree during the entire life of that tree, maybe once every 3 to 5 years. That's a good thing because I really hate pruning. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Now we'll get into Paw Paw marketing. Some possible outlets for pawpaws include grocery stores, farmers markets, mail order, processors, makers of ice cream or yogurt, and I'll address each of those separately. Large grocery store chains in the eastern U.S. do sometimes sell pawpaws. I know of them selling in grocery stores in Chicago and Ann Arbor, Michigan, Washington, D.C., probably a few other places. But in my opinion, grocery stores really aren't very good customers for pawpaws. Farmers markets are probably a better outlet. Quite a few farmers markets do occasionally have pawpaws during the pawpaw season. We brought pawpaws to the Iowa City Farmers Market once and sold out in one afternoon. But they would probably need to be located in fairly good-sized cities, preferably university towns with a well-educated market base. Pawpaws can be and are shipped mail order, but this is quite challenging because the pawpaw fruit is very soft when it's ripe and doesn't ship well and doesn't store well. You have to have special packaging to protect the pawpaws from damage during shipping. As FedEx, UPS, and Postal Service are all pretty rough on packages, and without special packaging, pawpaws will arrive in a state of mush. But it can be done. Usually it requires overnight delivery, and usually the cost of the shipping is several orders of magnitude above the cost of the actual fruit. This limits the market to people who really don't care what they cost. I think in the future, some of the best markets for pawpaws should be makers of ice cream and yogurt. I think pawpaw ice cream is absolutely the ultimate use of pawpaw fruit. I have frequently heard people make the statement that the pawpaw ice cream that they tried was the best ice cream they've ever had, and occasionally I hear people say pawpaw ice cream is absolutely the best thing they've ever tasted in their entire life. My wife likes to use the term awesome a lot. I reserve that term for just a few things. The Grand Canyon, giant sequoia trees, and pawpaw ice cream. But that market is a work in progress. The market that works the best for us is pick your own. This requires that we maintain a list of customers who are interested in picking pawpaws, and then we contact them either by telephone or email when the pawpaw season starts, and then wait for them to call or email back to set up an appointment. Then they come and pick. This is, if you can do it, this is the way to sell Paw Paw fruit. For one thing, it eliminates harvesting costs, but also handling costs, refrigeration costs, packaging costs, shipping costs. The only thing left is profit. The next slide. Yeah, and then one more. There's happy customers. Okay, and then one more. One thing that we do that really helps a lot is to provide a straw cushion underneath the tree so that when fruit falls, and it does fall, especially on windy days, the fruit is the fall of the fruit is cushioned so it doesn't bruise or get damaged by twigs or other sharp objects on the ground. Okay. I think we're going to have time for a little bit of extra discussion that I thought we might not get to. Let's skip ahead past the next slide and the next one. Yeah, this one. Okay. I mentioned the chemical found in the Paw Paw twigs, leaves, unripe fruit, and skin of the fruit. The chemical, or it's actually a family of chemicals called ananaceous acetogenins. They're discovered by Gerald McLaughlin, a professor of pharmacology at Purdue University, about 35 or 40 years ago now. And one thing he discovered about this chemical is that it was at the time and still is the single most powerful, potent anti-carcinogen ever discovered, either naturally occurring or man-made. When he discovered it, it was compared to the two most popular chemotherapy drugs that were available at the time, and it was 800 times more potent than one and 1,000 times more potent than the other. Okay, next slide. What's even better is the ananaceous acetogenins work in a way totally different from other chemotherapy drugs. The other chemotherapy drugs work by poisoning the nucleus of the cell, and they're just slightly more toxic to cancer cells compared to normal cells. But the ananaceous acetogenins, or the Paw Paw extract, works in a completely different way by suppressing the ATP production in the mitochondria of the cell. The ATP is the chemical that gives cells their energy. Because cancer cells use about 16 times more ATP than normal healthy cells, a dose of Paw Paw extract that would cause just a slight drop in energy level in a normal cell is absolutely lethal to tumor cells. Better still, because drug-resistant cancer cells use twice as much ATP as regular cancer cells, the Paw Paw extract is twice as effective against drug-resistant cancer cells compared to normal cancer cells. Okay, let's see if there's one more slide after this. The Paw Paw extract also has a side effect of making chemotherapy more tolerant to cancer patients. In fact, the Paw Paw cell reg, the Paw Paw extract, comes with a warning that it is very important that if you're taking chemotherapy along with Paw Paw extract, that you don't run out of the Paw Paw extract, because the Paw Paw extract dampens or reduces the side effects of the chemotherapy while making the chemotherapy itself more effective. There have been cases where people have died because they were taking Paw Paw extract along with chemotherapy. The doctor saw how well the patient was tolerating the chemotherapy, so he increased the dose of the chemotherapy drug. Then the patient ran out of Paw Paw extract, and then the side effects from the chemotherapy killed the patient. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Okay, do we have any questions?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and drop it in the chat box. I'm also going to open up a Q&A session. For those on the phone, press *6 if you want. So the Q&A session just started. So first I want to thank you, Tom, for an awesome talk about Paw Paw. I also love what you said about how you reserve awesome for a few things, and you reserve it for Paw Paw. I agree, Paw Paw is pretty awesome, but I use awesome a lot. And so, yeah, for people that are on the phone, *6 to ask a question, or if you don't want to have your mic on when you're asking the question, just drop it in the chat box, and I'll be coordinating the Q&A so that Tom can answer your questions. So I'm going to look in the chat box first. Okay, so we have a question from Kit, and she was asking, can you sell fruit that you can pick up from the? Can you sell the fruit that you pick up from the ground after it falls off the tree?
Okay, as I was saying, the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2012 makes it illegal to sell fruit that falls to the ground now. If it falls from the tree right to the ground. Now, if it falls onto a mat of straw, that's a different matter.
Okay, great. Now I'm going to move on to Rob, who's in our Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and open that up for you, get that started.
I put my Paw Paw trees underneath chestnut trees. And that way they aren't taking anything away from the chestnut trees, so I still get 100% of a chestnut crop and then 50 to 75% of a Paw Paw crop on the same acre at the same time. I'm also planting honeyberries in between the Paw Paw chestnut rows. The honeyberries are shade-tolerant berry producers. It will grow on the same soil as the Paw Paws and chestnut. I also have some perennial vegetables, including asparagus, rhubarb, horseradish, skirret, salsify, good King Henry, and I'm planning on adding a few more perennial vegetables in under the chestnut and Paw Paw trees also. So, yes, you can put lots of things in with Paw Paws.
Okay, great. I'm going to go on to the next question in the Q&A. Okay, Kim, you should be able to ask your question.
Oh, I just went ahead and, hi, Jess. I just went ahead and typed them in to the side. But I would be very curious to hear from Tom what he considers some good nursery sources for Paw Paw seedlings.
Well, I have Paw Paw seedlings, and they're all seedlings of grafted trees. There are probably other nurseries that sell seedlings of grafted Paw Paw trees, but I don't know who or what they are. Possibly a Blossom Nursery in Arkansas. But I don't know very many others.
Can people make their own Paw Paw extract for cancer from Lois?
can, although I don't. You would want to try, but Gerald McLaughlin, the guy who discovered the Papaya Extract in the first place, used to give out a recipe for making Papaya Extract using pawpaw twigs and then soaking them in a weak tea with Dawn dishwashing liquid because the chemicals are oil soluble, not water soluble. So you have to have something to get the chemical out of the twigs or the skin or the seeds or the leaves or whatever. But you can buy your Papaya Extract, and it's really cheap from Nature's Sunshine in Salt Lake City, Utah. And this was developed by Dr. Gerald McLaughlin. I'd much rather take that than drink a tea made with Dawn dishwashing liquid.
All right, and we have a question from Jonathan. He's asking about tips for starting from stratified seeds.
This is a trick that cost me 20 years to learn, but I'll go ahead and give it to you anyway. The first really important thing about germinating pawpaw seed is get the seed out of the fruit as soon as the fruit is ripe. If you leave the fruit or leave the seed in the fruit after it ripens for any length of time, it very quickly is reduced in viability. Now, get the fruit out. Don't let it dry out. Keep it refrigerated and moist until you're ready to germinate it. Then once you're ready to germinate it, give it plenty of heat and plenty of moisture. At 80 degrees Fahrenheit, it will take pawpaw seeds anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks to germinate. At 90 degrees, pawpaw seeds will germinate in 2 weeks or less. At 95 degrees, they germinate within about a week. But they have to be kept moist the whole time. But that's the real secret to germinating pawpaw seeds.
All right, thank you for sharing your trade secrets. And then our next question we have from Katie Adams. Are you aware of anyone who is processing large quantities of pawpaws?
No, I seriously doubt if anybody is processing large quantities of pawpaws right now because there just aren't large quantities available anywhere. Even the commercial growers usually just have a few acres of them, and they usually just sell the fruit fresh. I think there is a potential for a large market for processed pawpaw fruit, but the supply of fruit just isn't there yet.
Okay, and then our next question from Emerson Martin. How old are the plants when you transplant them to the field?
Well, let's back up a little bit. I strongly recommend against transplanting pawpaws. If you're talking about digging them up out of the ground, pawpaws usually don't survive that. If they do survive it, the root systems never recover and they just don't grow, or they'll grow very, very slowly and then have a very short lifespan. So don't try transplanting pawpaws. Either grow them in a pot that prevents root spiraling, or grow them in a raised bed with a growing medium consisting of very light porous stuff, such as a mix of peat and vermiculite. If you dig them out of soil, they're not going to do well.
And when you've been growing them in the vermiculite mix or in a pot, at what point are they old enough for you to then transplant into the field? Or not transplant, sorry, that was the issue. But in terms of putting them in the field.
Yeah, in my experience, it takes about 2 growing seasons to get them big enough to put out in the field and have them survive reliably. The most vulnerable part of the pawpaw is the root system. The tops can actually take as cold as minus 40 Fahrenheit. But the root system will be killed if it falls to 25 Fahrenheit above zero. So they need to have a root system that goes down at least several inches deep to avoid freezing during their first winters. Also, if you can mulch around a newly planted pawpaw, that will help prevent winter kill of the root system when it's really small.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we have a few more questions. Thanks, Tom, for answering all of these. This is really great. And so we have one about companion species. What can I grow in the pawpaw understory? And they recognize that the trees are pretty low to the ground, but is there anything you can put in the understory of the pawpaw?
Yeah, you could put all kinds of medicinal plants such as golden seal, ginseng, black cohosh. You can put perennial vegetables such as rhubarb, asparagus, horseradish, skirret, good King Henry, maybe perennial kale, wild leeks, just anything that you can grow on the forest floor, you could put under pawpaws pretty much.
Ah, that's so cool. Okay, and then another question we have, it's Derek from Ontario, so he's wondering what's the coldest temperature you have seen pawpaws tolerate on your site?
Well, on my farm, we got down to minus 37 in 1996, minus 37 Fahrenheit, which is, at that temperature, it's almost the same as Celsius. But on in a patch of wild pawpaws that were actually down in a deep frost pocket, I'm pretty sure it probably got at least a couple degrees colder than that, probably down to minus 40, which is minus 40 Fahrenheit and Celsius. And that wild patch produced fruit that year. After experiencing that temperature, even though that year it was a total crop failure for a lot of other crop trees, including apples, and peaches, plums, cherries, pears, but not pawpaws. The pawpaws, there was a small crop, but at least there was a crop of pawpaws that year.
All right, great. And I'm going to go back to the Q&A and just get the next caller going. See. All right, you should be able to ask your question now.
Hello. Yeah, a couple things. One, I wanted to point out that us poor guys in the Mid-Atlantic have been slammed by this Asimina web moth. So this is Dale Hendricks, and I left a comment there about that. And if he has time, I got a story about pigs that might be of interest.
Okay. Yeah, I've never even heard of Asimina web moth. Probably something we don't have in Iowa.
Yeah, well, count your blessings. I left a little hyperlink there to some pictures. It kind of decimates the growing tips of the pawpaws, makes them really look rough. Might take
Where
out.
Is that located?
Where is that what?
Where are you located? Where you have Asimina web moth?
Southeast Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But I first saw them down in the Delaware and Maryland, Delmarva Peninsula, and thought, oh, geez, a bad disease. And I read up on it, and it's that Asimina web moth. So hopefully it can't handle the cold out your way. But it's there for people to see that link, so it's something to watch out for in the Mid-Atlantic. It's not deadly, but it can beat the living heck out of the growing tips of the new growth.
Okay.
And you got a minute for a pig story?
Do we have a minute, Jess?
Well, we've got 10 minutes left. I want to make sure we get everyone's question first. And if we get everyone's question, you can go ahead and do *6 again, and we'll get your story. Does that sound good?
Sure, I'll happily wait.
Okay.
All good. Thanks.
All right. so Kim asked, I have read in a couple different places that pigs will not eat pawpaws. Do you happen to know if this is true? And this actually might be related to the pig story. But yeah, go ahead and answer that question, Tom.
Yeah, I don't have any experience with pigs and pawpaws. I do have experience with geese and pawpaws, and I should have probably mentioned that pawpaws can be potentially deadly to domestic fowl. I gave my flock of geese a pile of overripe pawpaws once, and they gulped them down greedily, and within a few minutes started staggering, and clear liquid was gushing from their mouths, and within a few more minutes they were dead. And I think, geese have gizzards before their stomach, and I think their gizzards were grinding up the pawpaw seeds, which have a high dose of that chemical in their seed coat, and they just got such a big dose of it, and they couldn't throw up the pawpaw seeds, so they died. Apparently, most wild birds, like wild turkeys, know better than to eat pawpaw seeds, but domestic geese do not.
And so, all right, Emerson is wondering what the spacing of the chestnut pawpaw plantings are.
Well, the spacing is whatever you want, but what I started doing was I put 2 pawpaws in between each pair of chestnuts, which were 20 feet apart. But I found that was a little bit too close, and I wasn't able to always get in between the trees with a mower. So now I put just 1 pawpaw in between every pair of chestnuts. So I have pawpaw and chestnut, 20 feet between chestnuts and 20 feet between pawpaws, but either one or the other every 10 feet within the row. And then the row is 20 feet apart.
There's a few follow-up questions about the sensitivity of domestic, or of, I think you were saying of geese to the pawpaw, or so some people are asking about chickens and ducks, how they do. Will they be in danger of, if they eat the fruit or the seed, will that hurt them? And then, oh, okay, and then we just have,
go ahead. The seed, probably going to die. Okay. I don't know whether they'll eat it or not, but yeah, I would say all kinds of domestic fowl would be at risk of eating pawpaw seeds and dying. Mammals are not at risk. Mammals cannot be poisoned by pawpaws, but birds can.
Okay, and then we have a question about storing pawpaw. What's the best way to store it after you harvest?
You can store fresh fruit in refrigeration for up to 2 weeks, or you can store, well, I pulp the fruit, make a puree or pulp, and then that can be frozen. That can be stored for years in the freezer.
Okay, sweet. That's good to know. All right, and now we're going to get back to the pig story. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic if you're ready to go. Just a second.
Edge of Amish country, and I've got a buddy that said, "Oh, I've got extra pawpaws," and he gave them to my Amish farmer buddy, who his kids fed them to the pigs. So the pigs were hungry, and apparently they were hungry enough to crunch them up, like our host here says. When you crunch them up and you break those seeds, they're in trouble. I believe it was 2 pigs. He definitely lost a pig or 2 from eating pawpaws.
Okay, there you go. Don't feed pigs your pawpaws.
All right, yeah. I love how we got that mystery solved. All right, great. Does anyone have any more questions? Okay, Dave wants to know how many acres of pawpaws you have.
I have enough acres that I don't know how many acres I have. I have maybe about a quarter acre of mature pawpaws, and then maybe another 15 or 16 acres of young pawpaws that aren't in production yet.
All right. Thank you, Tom, so much for such a great topic and discussion. I think a lot of people are really excited about learning about pawpaws. All right, have a wonderful evening, everyone, and I'll be sending out a recording of this talk that includes the slides and also the slides as well, so pause. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you, Todd.